Like, you just spent $50,000 up until this point, and then you bought your broadheads from Walmart because they were on sale. Like, it had an orange sticker on it. Like, this is where we're going to save money. No, sir. You buy good broadheads because everything you've done is just trying to get that thing inside an elk's lungs.
Hey, fellow elk fanatics, if you're completely obsessed with elk hunting like me, then join me every Wednesday for tips, tactics, and stories on elk hunting, from elk hunting legends to fellow DIYers. This is the Rich Outdoors Wapiti Wednesday. This episode of Wapiti Wednesday brought to you by Phelps Game Calls. Phelps Game Calls are hands down my favorite diaphragms, and I've tried out just about every diaphragm on the market, and the amp frame is what I carry. The amp frame, not only is extremely easy to use, but they're the most consistent calls you can find and extremely durable. As someone who can blow out a diaphragm in just a few days, the first time I used one of the new amp frame calls, I was blown away at how long it lasted. I can get a few weeks out of a single Phelps diaphragm versus a couple days out of just about any other diaphragm on the market. Personally, I like the amp gray and the amp white, but if you don't have any idea what to use or what to try, just grab 4 or 5 of them and see what you like. You know, some of you guys are going to like locating on one, and some of you guys are going to like the sexy cow calls on another. But either way, I think you'll be able to use any of them. They all sound great, and they all work super well. It's just kind of all on personal preference. A couple of you guys have asked me about the big bat bugles and if they're necessary. For me, 100%, I am naked in the woods without my bat bugle. The Phelps bat just gives me so much more reach when I'm bugling, as far as being able to be louder and carry a bugle farther into a canyon. If you only want to be the kind of guy that slips into a herd of elk and doesn't do a whole lot of screaming challenge bugles, even just having the bat as a locating tool is crucial. You can carry that bugle so much farther, locate a bull from farther away, and to me, it's an essential item in my toolkit. Go get yourself some Phelps Game Calls before they sell out. Before season comes, get to practicing, get good at it, use the TRO code, and you'll get free shipping off your entire order. This episode brought to you by Backcountry Fuel Box. Backcountry Fuel Box is my newest creation. It's a monthly subscription box full of backcountry meals, snacks, bars, and all kinds of cool high-energy options for your next backcountry adventure. I started the box because I wanted a way to try out all the cool new backcountry food options that were on the market. And also, so I would always have stuff on hand for my own adventures. There's just so many cool new options available. The June box had all kinds of great products and new companies that I think most people have probably never heard of. Brands like 4 Points Bars, Peak Refuel, Dark Mountain Energy, just to name a few. All in all, the June box was packed full with 10 awesome products and discount codes to all the companies within the box. Enough to taste test a few of the items and to hide the rest in my tote for September. The box is $33.30 a month, but if you use the TRO at checkout, use the TRO code, you'll get the box for $29.97 a month, and it is full of awesome stuff that you're actually going to use. Also, I just want to say a big shout out to all of you who have been sharing the box when you get it on social media. I am thoroughly humbled by the dozens and dozens of people that have been helping grow this thing, and it really does mean the world to me. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. There's a whole bunch of awesome stuff coming from this whole backcountry field project, and you guys have been awesome and instrumental in helping me get there and kind of grow this whole thing. So if you guys haven't yet, go check it out. Give it a try. There's literally zero commitment. I'm not trying to scam anyone. I just want everyone to stay signed up because the box is so awesome. Head over to backcountryfuelbox.com. Check it out. You won't be disappointed. All right. Thanks, guys.
All right. Yeah, this is the morning after podcast. Morning after Wapiti Wednesday on Sunday.
Right. What is it the morning after?
At the wedding.
Whose wedding?
My wedding.
Yeah, congratulations.
Debauchery. James. So last night we got hitched, and I was smart enough to have my good buddy James be the officiant, and we slipped in some real key language into the vows.
That's right. You know, Kelsey, God bless her, asked me to officiate the wedding, and it just seemed like a good opportunity to make sure that in the vows I could get her to say that you could hunt as much as you wanted forever.
Yeah.
And she agreed publicly. So it's
really
law.
have a choice. This is the key to negotiations is timing. And so you have to like work that in there.
And pressure.
I mean, what, she was going to say no?
No.
She couldn't back down.
There's no way out. But you had a clause as well, so you have to ensure that there's elk meat in the freezer at all times, which means that you can only be so much of a trophy hunter.
Oh, okay.
Like you're gonna have to kill.
Yeah. So.
Or you can borrow meat from me since I
have too much anyway. All right, we're gonna do a Wapiti Wednesday. James Nash, been on the podcast a couple of times. We were talking about doing one, and then I roped a bunch of my other buddies from Oregon into the podcast. Sam.
Yes, sir.
Welcome to the podcast. Mark, who has been avoiding getting on the podcast for as long as I've known him, or as long as I've been doing
Still trying.
Still trying. And Pat Mosier, another good hunting buddy.
How's it going?
We spent some time in the woods.
Here.
Pat and I spent a lot of time in the woods.
Oh, yeah.
Looking at elk.
Gone on some adventures in Montana. Gone the Snake River together.
Yeah, we were there when we shot the sharps. That was the sharp shit show is what we call it.
Yes, it was. That was a shit show for sure.
Good bulls, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. We put a lot of work into that hunt.
Yeah, Pat and I went in a week early.
Yeah.
And we're in there by ourselves, just chilling.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. I think scouting was more fun than the hunt.
Yeah, that was a good time. So yeah, we're going to talk some elk hunting, tell some stories.
Awesome.
So what James and I are going to do, we want to talk about, you've been on a couple times, we've talked about all kinds of your craziness, but I want to kind of go into a lot of, just the elk science and stuff behind the ranch that you're working on.
Some of the higher echelons of wildlife management that we're doing.
Yeah, because it's not a lot of people, not a lot of agencies have even gotten to do what you're getting to do as far as research behind elk and whatnot. And specifically within Oregon and like trying to figure out things that not a lot of agencies have tried to figure out, which is interesting because you're basically growing elk like you would grow whitetail.
Sort of. What we're trying to do is create the healthiest animal that we can and see how that impacts the dynamics within the herd across the full spectrum. So my theory here is that if I can get the bulls and the cows in peak physical condition by manipulating their habitat using native grasses and minerals, then I can get the estrus cycle synchronized, and by doing so we can get more cows bred by more bulls, and that's going to increase the genetic diversity if they're all coming into a cycle at the same time. If we can accomplish that, then the calves will all be born closer together, and there's already science to prove that having calves born closer together overwhelms predators, because the older a calf gets, the more it can evade a predator. It's also going to be born earlier and at a larger size because it came from a healthier cow. And then it goes into fall and winter larger, and the science has already shown that the larger the calf is going into the fall, the higher its chances are of surviving the first winter, which is a high rate of mortality. From that point, we're just going to see how it helps the bulls grow antler. And if we can get them healthier, then maybe we're going to break fewer tines during the rut, and they won't have to pull pull as much from their own bodies to grow that antler. So elk undergo osteoporosis every time they grow antlers, because that's during a time of year when they can't get all the calcium triphosphate and magnesium selenium that they need from the soil and from the vegetation that's available. So they actually pull those minerals to grow their antler from their own skeletal system, which weakens their bones.
Really?
And then during mineralization, when they're starting to harden their antlers in the fall, they're pulling those nutrients back out of their antlers into their body when they need to get strong for the rut. But if we can boost all the levels of that to an optimal level, then hopefully we have stronger, bigger antler, and we can go into the rut in better condition.
So you kind of came into this project and, I guess outfitter, lots of time in the woods, things like that. But you were given an opportunity to be a ranch manager essentially for a pretty cool project. Going into this, I mean, obviously, what's your background and what's your approach, and how is that different from what you think a lot of the approaches is from other ranches or other people in the same position?
Well, I'm in this awkward space because I primarily guide on private land.
Yeah.
And then I primarily hunt on public land. And I'm an outfitter, but I'm also a cattle rancher. Mm. So I'm taking things from both sides of the house and trying to combine them. So what we're doing with the elk, like, this isn't a high fence operation. This is a migratory herd. I'm just trying to make the best habitat that I can for the animals that utilize it while they're there. But I'm also looking at it from a perspective of somebody who's trying to raise cattle and keep them healthy in the ways that we do that. And in my research of elk, I haven't found anywhere that states the nutritional requirements of the elk. It hasn't been done. So a lot of states don't really allow habitat manipulation the way we can in Oregon. For example, here in Montana, you can't feed animals, but in Oregon you can. So you can supplement feed during certain times of the year. And, that gives us a real opportunity. But how do we supplement that feed? Obviously, I don't want to give them corn and soy and nonsense like that. Mm-hmm. I want to do it with natural grasses. So I work with
because you're really concerned about non-GMO elk.
No, I'm just trying to manage it holistically and healthy.
Yeah. So your approach is essentially taking your background as being a cattle rancher and taking the same principles and concepts and just diving into how would I do this if these were my animals, which they are. Even though you don't own them and they come and go as they please, it's still how do you take what you know from the ranching side and to benefit elk, right?
Yeah, and just learning, taking these gaps in science and trying to fill them up by collecting our own data and then crunching it.
Yeah.
So we've got botanists, we've got ecologists. We're doing everything that we can to fill in these gaps, and then that's just the first step before we're actually going into deciding which of these animals we're going to try and target to harvest. And it's chaos theory to a certain degree because we don't know. We don't know which of these animals are going to suffer natural mortality, which of them are going to get killed on public land. There's a lack of control there. We're just going to do the best that we can. And there's so much more that you can do in the off season besides just like hanging game cameras and watching elk, wallow or whatever.
So how do you think any of this is applicable to people who hunt public land or just hunt elk?
It's applicable if you want to scout based on the nutritional quality of forage and vegetation in an area. And I think that it's looked at, but it's a really critical portion of habitat. And especially with bulls, sanctuary is critical, but so is feed. And cows...
Quality of feed.
Quality of feed. Cows with calves will sacrifice quality of feed for safety. And bulls will as well, but less so than cows. So if you're going to be hunting early season before bulls have gone to start gathering harems and whatnot, then you really need to think about places that have sanctuary and high food quality.
So it's understanding what they're eating and trying to figure out that, not just like, oh, there is feed or not feed. Like there's such a spectrum there because one feed is not equal to another, and creating that. And it gets into that whole genetics versus nutrition type things where you're like, well, does this area create big bulls because it has quote unquote genetics, or is it because it has high quality feed?
And you have to think about the phenological stages of the plants that the elk are targeting at different times of the year. So if the grass is green, it's got a lot more nutritional value than when it cures out later in the year. So then are they starting to browse more on leaves and shrubs? And, you know, elk act like aspen leaves have crack in them. And I think that they're probably, there is some type of euphoric effect from eating aspen because elk just absolutely love it. So start to think about how that's going to change and if that's going to change where an elk is. And if you've hung a camera in July, people know, well, that elk's going to be someplace else in August. Yeah. But why? And start thinking about that and then put yourself there.
Yeah, one of the things you've done is you're running cameras year-round. Lots of cameras.
Lots of cameras year-round, and it's all video now. So that was the big transition this year is we went from all Reconnex, 100% covert cameras to stealth cams that were running completely video. And the benefit to that is that with a still, you get to see what's happening there and make some guesses about what's occurred on either side of the time that photo was taken. With a video, you get to know the context of what's going on a little bit. But the biggest benefit above anything else is the audio. And I wasn't expecting that at all. But the audio encompasses the entire area that microphone can pick up. And it's HD audio. It's absolutely incredible. You can hear elk eating and what that sounds like. And I'm picking up noises that these elk are making that I've never heard before. And then I can see their behavior while they're making that noise and then start to make some assumptions about what that sound means. And the really neat thing for me and my guides is we can take these sound bites of these cows and we can practice calling and trying to sound like our elk. So I'm not trying to sound like Corey Jacobson's estimation of what a cow elk sounds like.
Yeah.
I'm not listening to video bites from elk in Jackson, Wyoming.
Yeah.
I'm listening to the elk that we're going to be hunting and then trying to imitate those sounds.
Huh. And you think they're that different?
It helps. It doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
Right? There are nuances.
Yeah.
And then later on, we're going to be able to start IDing bulls by their bugles as well. And then when you hear that bull, you're not going to have to have seen him with your eyeballs to know who he is. It's like, yeah, you know, that one's worth going after. That one we're saving for later in the season, whatever.
How has your setup changed for targeting video over images?
Well, with images, I wanted to shoot more of an oblique down the trail that they were moving on. And with a video, I'm going closer to perpendicular.
Because you're trying to get them crossing it? Are you trying to hit open areas? Are you trying to get them on camera longer to get audio?
Well, I'm not as concerned about getting that one shot that's going to show me everything that I want to see. Mm-hmm. And with the video, I know I'm going to get lots of angles and lots of frames that I can break down and look at if it's a keeper video that I need for data collection.
When it comes to like season long, how do you think about your setups throughout the year? It's because, I mean, a lot of guys, myself included, throw a camera on a wallow and that's it. But that has a limited time span and limited significance as well. And so like because you're on one specific spot, it's kind of tough for you because you have this chunk of property and this is what you're managing. So you don't have all the pieces of the puzzle. And you're still kind of trying to figure that out, where those pieces lie and what these elk are doing. But like, do you change your setups as far as wallows, trails, choke points, feeding areas? I mean, camera at all?
I'm running so many cameras that I get the opportunity to put them in a lot of different areas. Mm-hmm. So water is a good place to get inventory of all the elk. It lets me know what my cow-calf ratio is. And something that's been interesting about water this year is that I've found that the elk have stratified into several different types of groups. So there's the cow-calf group, and they're so noisy. If you look at my Instagram, I've got some videos on there of cows and calves just making an absolute racket. It's unbelievable, the cacophony of noise. And then there's the bachelor groups of bulls, which, everybody knows about. And those are the bulls that are between 2.5 and 4.5, 5.5 years old. And then there's groups of mature bulls that I would consider to be, 5 to 6 years and older. And they're usually in groups of 3, almost always in groups of 3. Really? And then typically with that, there'll be 2 bulls that are more or less equal, and then one that's slightly younger or slightly smaller, but not necessarily younger. That's just what I'm seeing. And those are all fairly well-known groups of elk at this time of year. One of the things that I've seen this year that I found surprising that I didn't know existed is that there's a 4th group, which is cows without calves. And they stick together. And I don't know whether those are dry cows that didn't get bred, whether they aborted calves, whether their calves got eaten by bears early on. There's no way of knowing for me how that happened, but I do have groups of cows that are solitary, not solitary, but they're together and they don't have any calves. That's fascinating. I don't know what that means for hunting later on, but
I wish you could ID those and figure out when they join the rest of the herd.
Dude, I know.
Are they outcasts?
I know. There's so much that I want to know. I'm going to sound like Big Brother here, but if I could have RFID chips in these elk so that when they pass in front of my camera, I could know who they are and start tracking, which calves they're having, and then the potential of those calves to survive and propagate and grow into bulls. But at that point, you're farming. Yeah. So that's part of the joy and frustration of wildlife management is you don't have those controls. So you just do everything that you can beyond that. But yeah, the audio is super cool. And then as far as setup, one of the biggest things with that, we went to all solar panels and 12-volt batteries. And I run so many cameras that it was taking me 3 days to recharge all of my AA's every time I was going out. And I would have every plug-in in the house with a whole charger rack full of AA's, and you could just probably see my electricity bill spinning outside. But the solar panels are great. We are, of course, having problems with bears and elk and stuff like that. But if you get them high enough, it seems like the bears will just kind of bat at the security box a little bit and then leave. But the elk, if they can reach it, they'll eat anything that they can get in their mouth. I think if you could fish for elk, it would be super easy. Just drop something shiny from a tree and they're going to put it in their mouth.
Fishing for elk.
They drive me crazy.
Going back to the herd dynamics and what you're seeing, what do you think that means as far as these bulls and watching the different variations? It's how do you know if that's the biggest bull in the area? What have you learned from seeing different bachelor groups? Is that if I'm seeing bachelor groups, does that mean I'm not going to have a big bull in there? If I see a big bull that's, in a threesome, is that, going to be the herd? What's that? What do those things tell you when you see those?
Mostly it's just inventory. What I found is that when the rut happens, the sure enough third week of September rut, you can have a bull that displaces over a tremendous amount of ground, and he can show up from 20, 30 miles away. And he might do the same thing every year. And I have seen that quite a bit. So I don't know that it really helps you that much to see these bulls and then think about where to hunt them third week of September. But what I can say is that the bulls that you're seeing right now are going to be where you left them before the rut. So if you're in a state that gets to start hunting in August, that bull's, he's still going to be pretty close by. Yeah. As long as there's forage to support him remaining there.
Yeah. And that kind of gets into, we're talking in regards to Oregon, it gets to hunt a little bit early, and a lot of those elk, interesting conversation that you and I had yesterday was about how to hunt these elk. Because you're on a limited amount of area, you can't mess with them for 4 weeks straight. So how do you least intrusively hunt them? And so it changes the dynamic of how you hunt those elk in the early first 2 weeks, to say. And a lot of people, run cameras, and we all run cameras, and you find, yeah, that's awesome, but then the bulls are gone by the time you hunt them in the last week. But with Oregon, one thing you can do is hunt them opening week. And so if you can find that bull, a good 5-year-old bull is doing the same thing, and he's probably going to be doing that opening day, or at least opening couple days. It's doable. How is, watching what you're doing and understanding that you have a limited amount of area that you can't screw things up on? How does that change your, thoughts on how you're going to hunt the first 2 weeks and having your guides hunt the first 2 weeks?
Well, we have a really progressive approach to how we attack the season. Mm-hmm. And it's not wildly different from how we hunt public ground, but it's a little bit different because we need to ensure that the ground that we're hunting, I say that it remains, I say that it needs to remain exothermic. Mm-hmm. So I want more heat and pressure on the outside of the property than there is on the inside of the property. Mm-hmm. And as long as I have that, then I don't have to worry about the elk leaving altogether, because they're going to get pressured back in. But when they come back in, they're going to go to obscure places because they were pressured out of the place that they felt safe initially. Yeah. But getting straight into it, first week, we're going to hunt water. We're going to hunt transition areas. We're going to do a lot of raking. Bulls are really territorial at that time, and they're not used to having other bulls get inside of their bubble. I find the same thing with beef cattle. And if anybody has had to move bulls in a pasture, like moo cow bulls, there will be 7 bulls in a pasture, and they're all laying down, and there's some flies buzzing around them, and they're just as cool as can be. And as soon as you ride in there, they get up and they move a little bit, and they all immediately start fighting. And it's so frustrating because you've just got this chaos going on, and it's probably going to end up going through 5 strands of barbed wire somewhere. And hopefully that's still on your ranch, not on the neighbors. But moving bulls is such a pain in the ass. And the reason that it happened, and my dad, told me this after 10 years of frustration on my end, is that those bulls all have their own territory within the pasture. And as soon as you pressure them, you've displaced where they are, and now they have to reassert dominance over each other. And it's absolutely the same way with bull elk early season. Even those bachelor groups, if you watch the way that they move through a meadow, if they move through a meadow the same way, it's like they're in formation, like they have their space. Mm-hmm. And whitetail deer have the same thing. And if you follow GPS points on some of these things that QDMA has done, it shows that these bucks will go to the same field, but they'll stay in the same portion of the field each night. Mm-hmm. So if you invade that bull's personal space and you rake a tree early season, then you've just challenged him in a way that he has to come investigate. Mm-hmm. But it's still not very threatening. You're not going to shove him out of that area because it's his area. So if it doesn't work out, the day's not over. You haven't lost that bull. But if it does work out, cool. You walked in and you shot him. Good job. No,
that's great. I think a lot of people go into a hunt or anything. You listen to Corey Jacobson, and this is how we're going to do it. We have this master plan. And for some people, if you only hunt the first week, that's great. But if you are playing the long game in season, you can really screw things up and just have to find a new area. And there's something to be said for playing it long game.
Yeah, and private land isn't the only situation where you're restricted to one piece of ground to hunt on. There's lots of people that hunt public ground and they hunt one canyon, and that's the place that they have access to. It's close to their home. It's the place that they know. They're comfortable there, whatever. And if they want to hunt that through the full season and they want to tromp in there every day and throw out a location bugle and then move in close at 10:30 in the morning and then try and challenge a bull, dude, you just can't do that for 30 days.
No,
elk won't tolerate it.
No, and Mosier and I have done this before. Like we pack into an area a long ways in, and you're limited to the amount of ground that you can physically walk to from your tent.
Yeah.
And so you have to play a little bit smooth. I mean, you can't just go bugle off every ridge and see what fires off, because in a matter of 2 days, we would have either killed or scared everything within walking distance of our camp.
Right.
And we have to either let that calm back down or whatever. And, Moj and I have been in there, and it's like 7 days into a hunt, we've pretty much screwed everything there was and not killed anything. And now it's like,
that puts you in a bad spot, because you just
do you
spent
pack out
2 days getting into an area and getting ready, and then then you have to go find somewhere else to go.
And we've done that. You and I've sat there like, well, we only have 2 days left. It sucks because what are we going to do? We have, like, if we pack out, we'll have no time to pack in somewhere else. And, we could just sit here and, nothing's answering, and you just kind of, it sucks. It really sucks. And I think that's where you get into trouble, is like everyone likes to talk about great theories and plans, but when you get punched in the mouth in the backcountry, what's the backup plan? And so I really like this conversation we had about, breaking and playing it easy, especially that early season. You get gung-ho, you want to go in early September and kill bulls. I mean, who doesn't want to go screaming at bull? We miss it. But you can screw it up that first week, and then you're like, oh, well, now I got to go find a new area. No, just playing it smooth, playing it, the slow game. And Simon,
it is always good to have a backup plan. You always have to have something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, having a good, flexible, dynamic plan that you can roll with the punches is really important.
Yeah.
And the way to do that is to keep your plans general and task driven, because as soon as you make a specific plan, whatever goes wrong wrecks everything after that.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things that came up in the e-scouting podcast we did with Mark Livesay, he was talking about making a plan, like having plans out, like on paper. This is a hunt I could do. This is a hunt I could do. I could go check this. I could do this. And that same hunt that Moshe and I were in there super deep early, it was, you're in there and you run through kind of like, this is our game plan. And that all fell to shit. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now what are we going to do? And when you get back out, you're like, oh shit, we could have checked there. We could have went here. We probably could have done this, this, and this. And so full believer having this list set out this year of like, okay, these are the hunts we could do. And if it's nothing but a refresher, because you get in the backcountry, you get worn down 7 days of working your butt off, and you're kind of fatigued, and you're just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know. What should we do? Like, how many times does that happen?
Yeah, exactly.
What do you want to do tonight? I have no idea.
It's almost good to have that plan, and then you can have like a drainage plan of, okay, let's go to this drainage today, and then we kind of move down, and then 5 days later, you might be able to go back to that first drainage, and it'll be hot again.
Yeah.
So the way I do it is, in the evening, wintertime, summertime, whatever. When I'm e-scouting, I'm looking through Google Earth and Onyx and things like that. And when I get to that point where I feel like, oh, that's an area that I should check out, I need to keep that in mind. I use that little area feature, and I block it in. So then when I'm scanning my Onyx, I've got all these blue blocks and circles in different places, and those are the places that I've thought about briefly that I want to go back and look at.
Yeah.
And then when I have the time to go scout, I can go in and look at it, and then I can confirm or deny any assumptions that I've made.
That's a good idea, because then you can just have it on your phone while you're out there.
Right.
They almost need like a notes feature within Onyx, so I could like pull up my notes and be like blue spot here, and then it would pull up and be like, hey, thought about checking this timber patch. Or how many times does it happen when you're hunting on day 2 and you're like, man, I should go check that timber patch over there, put that note in, and then work backwards. And then on day 10, when your brain just doesn't work and you're just so tired, you're like, oh yeah, I was gonna go check that drainage over there.
Yeah.
One of the things I will say about slow playing, a lot of the media that people are consuming about elk hunting right now is a really in-your-face approach, with Elk 101 and Phelps and Born and Raised. That's kind of what they're doing, right? And they're moving around a lot to do it. I will say that with the situation that I'm in, I do like to slow play into it, but that was part of a lung that came out that time, wasn't it?
No, I think so.
That's all right. You've got 2. There's a time where you have to read an elk, and that elk is going to tell you it's on. And last year, I was going in on opening day with a buddy who drew a good tag, and we got to where we wanted to be and just couldn't wait. We're like, I had to cook off a bugle. Like, that's why I brought the bugle with me. I like the sound it makes. and a bull lit up, and I think it was August 24th or 25th, very early. But the way he answered back wasn't, "Hey, I heard you. I'm also here." It was like, "You're a bit close." I was like, "Dude, do you want to try and wait until the morning to work him?" And my buddy's like, "No, let's do it." And we had that bull fired up, ready to go, 70 yards, raking, thrashing, screaming, challenging back in, the last week of August.
Yeah.
And he was ready, and he told us he was ready. And had it been the next morning, we could have just shot him. Yeah. And, Kevin, he's been on the podcast. He ended up killing a great bull a couple weeks later. But
it can happen. Remember that time we hiked into Montana on a scout trip, and literally daylight of opening day, like, let's just crack off a bugle. Literally crack off a locate bugle. Bull cracks off, and we're like, "That's cool. It's September." And then the next thing, we see that bull coming 500 yards away, and he uphill.
Was running to us.
He was coming, and it was a long ways. We were not in his territory.
Right.
Like, he was in the bottom, and all of a sudden you see him coming, and actually happened so fast. How far was that bull?
Oh, he was easy 500 yards.
Easy 500 yards.
And we were not prepared for this at all.
Wind is going down to him.
Right to
and
him.
Literally within 10 minutes, he was up enough that he winded us. He came up that drainage, and we were trying to get around him, but just, I think, crossing that drainage that we had to cross, he winded us. Yeah. There was just no way around it. But opening day.
But we were just looking around. We were just on a little scout trip. Didn't expect that at all. And that scout trip turned into a 5-day hunt. I mean, it was, we were just in the bulls
covered up
all
in bulls,
over.
Screaming their head off. So it can happen. And so I'm not going to say here, I think raking's great. I think bugling's great. Bugling's really great. But at the same time, it's just like, you have to play the circumstance with the cards you're given, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So you just said it. But the thing that saves elk lives is wind in the mountains. And we have a guy here that probably understands wind in the mountains at a level that nobody else does.
The wind in the mountains, I'd say, is more like it's more like water. I mean, if you can picture water, like a wave of water flowing over those mountains, and picture, it's just going all kinds of different ways, swirling around trees, doing all that, and that's what I use.
Mark's a helicopter pilot who does a lot of game capture. That's all he does. And so when you say you understand wind, it's because you're
flying in the mountains, chasing animals all the time. Yeah, you're literally in the wind all the time. So, but that's the best way that I've ever been able to explain it. Really, it's just like water. You can picture water flowing down that mountain or coming over the top and down. Chances are that's what your winds are going to be doing.
And that's a great analogy. I think you have told me that analogy too, is the water. And so when you think, and this is where people screw it up, especially flatlanders will think, "Oh, I'm standing here, wind is going left to right." It does not mean that wind is going left to right over there. Right. Because when you look at a canyon, like, okay, it's going left to right here, but why? And it's flowing. So if it's flowing up a mountain or down a mountain, depending on thermals, it can change. And like if you're on a ridge, it'll change because you may have a north wind, but yet you have the drafts coming down the mountain, which is going to create in this gully or this saddle or whatever it is, and it changes. So always, like you've told me this before, and it's a great way to explain it to people, is like, just imagine it's flowing, and especially where two rivers meet, like just because you have a stream coming in, this stream's going this way, but the river's going this way. So look at the mountain structure, say this is the bigger canyon, so that's going to be the bigger river, essentially. So imagine that wind going this way. But on the ridge, you have this tributary coming into it. And if it's just a breeze, you'll get this little tributary and it's going this way. But as soon as it hits that river, which is the thermals moving, it's going to turn it and go that way.
Yeah, wind's a almost impossible thing to wrap your head around and try and figure it out, really, especially in the mountains. It's just so unpredictable.
Right.
Yeah.
So you don't think I guess predictable is a good way to do it. Like, how do you look at a mountain you're flying through? I mean, you just guess and check, or do you think you can wrap your head around, like, okay, when I come over this knob, it's probably going to do this, or?
Yeah. If, there's some places where the winds generally comes from a certain direction, prevailing winds, like say out of the west, you can you can play the cards pretty good in the mountains like that, but
you're still probably approaching ridges at an angle, not knowing for sure what's going to happen when you hit it.
You know, it depends on how hard the wind's blowing too. If it's only 10 knots, well, whatever, you fly wherever you want. But you get into 20, 25, you know, then it gets a little bumpy, and you got to play the windward side of the hills a little bit different. But
yeah,
another way to think about wind is that, you know, we've been lied to. Everybody told us that wind blows, but it actually sucks.
Sure.
Right? So wind is air moving from one place to another because of a lighter pressure in the direction that it's going to. And where water is moved by gravity, wind is moved by temperature change.
So true. There's a book. Have you showed you that book, the olfaction book?
No.
Predator-prey dynamics.
Oh, right.
And the role of olfaction, whatever it is. I want to get that. The professor that wrote that, I want to get him on. You read that book and you're like, mind blown. And that is the most underrated thing, is wind and understanding. Because as humans, we don't operate on wind. Animals 100% operate on wind and scent. Everything is done. And especially in the mountains, they understand the same way we just think about walking to the store. We don't really think about it. We can just walk, you know, and we know how the roads work or where to cross, where not to cross. They do the same thing with wind and thermals. Animals they live in that environment, and that's how they operate. The hands down most underutilized thing, or most understood thing, I guess you say, people just don't understand wind and don't take the time. And I think on a certain level, people are like, oh, keep the wind in your face. It's so simple. But then it swirls, right? Or it changes.
Yeah, predicting wind is brutal. I don't have... I'm in a sticky place. I get the glorious opportunity to hunt elk on relatively flat ground, which, you know, is not the way I get to hunt elk when I'm hunting for myself. But when I'm guiding, it's mostly on flat ground. And that's awesome because it's easy to cruise around. But what's not awesome about it is I don't have terrain to help dictate that wind.
Yeah.
So it is a struggle.
Yeah.
And that wind on the back of your neck happens all the time.
That Sled Springs country is a lot like that. You get on those top ground
brutal.
And it's just that rolling hill. It's great. It's rolling hill country, you know? And you'd think that the wind would just blow, but man, it swirls in that stuff so bad.
It does, especially when you're under a high pressure area and it's hot outside and the air gets a little bit unstable and starts moving vertically rather than horizontally like it does in a low pressure system. Man, you just don't know what's going to happen, but you do know that it is going to move. And keeping that dynamic plan where it's like, okay, this is what's going to happen if the wind does move. Just thinking about that for 10 seconds before you set up lets you make your reaction so much faster.
Yeah.
And I see so many people go in and they get set up and the wind starts to move and they just panic and they freeze. They're like, maybe
if I don't move,
the justice in the universe will allow the wind to shift again.
Hey, I've been there. I have hoped and prayed, like, it feels on the back of your neck, please, 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 please.
But I think the thing to do is bail.
Yeah.
Like, if it switches, get out of there.
Yep.
Turn around and run.
Get out of there, because you
Make
will
noise.
blow them out.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. You're going to blow the elk out if the wind gets them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it goes back to playing that slow game. You know, we talk about early season hunting. Safety first.
Yes.
Safety first. And like, because I've pushed it. You know, you've been with me, Pat, and when we've like, opening day, wind's not perfect, but goddamn, that bull's screaming, he's right there.
Yeah. Let's go try to get in on him. It never works.
It never works. You never see that bull again. It goes back in the slow game and just playing it and not being afraid to back out.
Yeah.
That's
you can
key.
back out and go around, or you got to come up with a game plan. But if you go after it,
get the hell out of there.
You're gonna bust them.
One of the worst times that I ever blew this. I was hunting a guy that I respect as much as I do anyone in the universe. He's a former commandant of the Marine Corps. Just an awesome, awesome man. And he had recently blown up his ankle. We'd spent 9 days in the high country, you know, above 9,000 feet, chasing mountain elk. He was toughing it out. just unbelievable guy. And then we found some elk in a canyon. Nice 6-point bull, bunch of cows. Watch him come down the south face, get in the north. We're above the north, like they're going to bed down. It is on, like we're going to go down and make this happen. And it's like 8:30 in the morning, right? And I'm glassing the other side, watching the grass. It's going uphill. Like we're good. And I get over to the edge, and there's sun on the part of the ridge that I'm on, and the wind's coming up. I'm like, yeah, we've got it. We're above elk that are bedded. I've got a bull with a bunch of cows. I saw, a raghorn that he chased off earlier. I kind of know what that raghorn sounds like. Like, yeah. I was just so excited, so confident. I was like, all right, sir, let's go. We're going to go kill an elk. And we bailed off. And as soon as we got in the shade, that wind was still cutting downhill.
Yeah.
Because it's still cold. It's in the shade.
Yeah.
Yep. And we blew him up.
That's the worst.
I was so disappointed.
I did that last 2 years ago. I just found this bull, and they're bedded on open stuff, and you can get on that ridge right above them, and it's just sparse trees, and I can see the winds going this way, and it's perfect. I could drop down 50 yards from that bull. Like literally, when I crest the hill, I'm probably going to be 60, so I got to cover maybe 10 yards or just shoot from the top, and it'll be money. And I fight blowdown, the worst Montana blowdown in your life. Like, not touch the ground for like 200 yards through the pines and all that. Fight. Greg was with me. Man, we fought. It probably took 2.5 hours to get around this reprod patch and blow down and get over there. And as soon as I get to the top, the wind was different from where it was in that, just a tiny little saddle. Where I was in the saddle, it was, right to left, perfect. And as soon as you get on top of that ridge, it was coming that prevailing wind was just blowing over the top, and it was just swirling right where they were. And that's why they were there. They knew it was just going to sit there and spin on the top of that hill.
Right.
And so as soon as I crack out there, I feel the wind on my neck. And that's one of those times you're like, maybe if I just really think about not smelling, I must be the pine tree. And then hear that. I look down, there's a calf, and she had stood up, smelled me, gone.
Yep.
Damn it. I was not the pine tree.
When I was hunting Cape buffalo in Africa, sometimes the wind would swirl, and we got busted by the wind more times than I can count. But sometimes the wind would swirl, and the buffalo didn't know where that scent had come from because it was a sure enough swirling wind. And one time they took off, and the whole herd came right over the top of us.
Ooh.
And I was like, what do you do? Is this like a video game where you shoot your way out of it or what? And the PH goes, find a tree, lad. And I turned around, and all the good trees already had trackers in it. And I ended up climbing this tree the size of a beer can. And as soon as I was high enough above the ground, it like drooped over. And all these buffalo were running past, and my rifle fell down, and it was just chaos. But I say that because I've never had that experience with elk. Swirling winds, they always know where it came from.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's weird how they know that.
It is weird.
Yeah.
But
I want to talk about hunting some of that rolling country. You talked about hunting flatland and how easy it is, and you can just do it every day.
Yeah.
Part of that is like, it's easy to understand elk behavior when there's a mountain, right? Like it all makes sense. But on the North Slope, Corey Jacobson and you guys were talking about this the other day at the bow shoot. Bulls bed on North Slope until there's not a North Slope. Then where do they bed? Where do they feed? Like what? There's no rhyme or reason, right? So all these things that we talk about as far as elk behavior make sense when it's a mountain and there's limited feed. But when you have tough country to hunt that's rolling hills and there's feed and bedding / water throughout the whole thing, what have you noticed about that elk dynamic and or like area, that type of hunting?
Well, I think of it in two ways. So one area that I hunt is open rolling hills, and it's prairie. There's no trees on it at all, except for a few norths on some of these buttes. Mm-hmm. And in those places, the elk are typically going to bed on a knob where they can see out in lots of directions, or right on the edge, the underside of a little draw or canyon where they can get a little bit of shade.
Yeah.
In the timber, where it's open, fairly open timber, but still flat and rolling, it's all about thermal cover. And what I'm looking for there is the type of trees. And I want a tree that's losing its needles frequently. And tamarack, or the western larch, is a great example of that. And if you get under tamarack, it's losing its needles every year, and they stay pretty soft. So it makes a nice place to bed down. And whenever I'm trapping and I set a trap in the ground, I try and set that area in a way that if I was barefoot, that's where I would step. And when I'm thinking about where elk are going to bed, I think about a place that I would like to take a nap. And I'm a big proponent of elk naps, as we've often talked about, and you've had to experience around me. But
elk naps or mountain naps kill elk.
Yeah, that's right. Naps kill elk. But if you really think about it from those terms and that standpoint, you're in the same environment as they are. You have basically the same needs as them. So if you're finding that thermal cover where you're going to get some shade, where the ground is going to be soft, where you're not going to be bothered by mosquitoes or biting flies, probably the elk are going to dig that same stuff too. Mm-hmm. So take a look around, find those tamaracks. There's a little bit of shade there. There's a good chance there's an elk sleeping under it.
Yeah. No, and
if there's not, that's
true.
A great place for you to take a nap.
And if you take a nap there, that's why naps kill elk. It's because the elk are just looking for the same spots.
Exactly.
Like, hey, my nap spot, bro.
Yeah. How many people have been taking an elk nap and then they're like, this bull just walked up there and bugled at me and my wife shot him?
Yeah. Someone needs leave a comment if you've ever taken a nap and woke up and find an elk, because I've definitely done that.
Oh, yeah.
That's why you nap with your stuff ready.
Yes.
Arrow knocked. Just knock an arrow, set it down.
What kind of arrow?
I don't know. What do you mean?
How heavy's your arrow?
Oh, we're going to talk arrow weights?
Please.
Please. So, James puts a boat anchor on his bow that's shaped a lot like an arrow. He even fletches the back of it and shoots a boat anchor. How heavy is your arrow?
I would. It's 632.
632 grain arrow.
That's a big arrow.
Yeah, I'm a 500 grain arrow. It's not like I shoot a light, little flimsy arrow. I still shoot 125 grain head.
Yeah, that's JV.
That's JV. That's rookie hour.
People get freaked out about grains because grains are small, and they think that there's going to be a huge difference between 100 grains and 125 grains. It's like 7,000 grains in a pound. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. They're a very small,
minute
form of measurement.
Yeah.
And that number scares people. I shoot a 200 grain broadhead, and I love it.
Yeah.
But
so, what's your theory? Have you read the Dr. Ashby studies?
Yes, I have.
Agree then, I assume?
I do. I mean, I'm always going to agree with data.
Yeah.
You can't.
It goes back to like what you're doing. I mean, data is king.
Right.
Like, test everything. Like, doesn't matter. Do you think so you're a proponent of the Ashby studies, which is basically saying that heavy arrow is better. Do you think there's a point that it has negative or diminishing returns?
I think that there is, but it's dependent upon the amount of force applied to that arrow. So you could have a 1,600 grain arrow, and if you're pulling 150 pounds of draw weight and you're getting that arrow to move 265 feet per second, that would be a fantastic arrow. You could shoot through the pine tree and then through the elk, and that would be very cool, because sometimes they use pine trees very cowardly to hide behind.
Just to shoot through the tree.
Yes.
I think your 640 grain arrow could go through it just fine.
Some trees, for sure. And that's one of the benefits. Like, how many guys have hit a limb and had their arrow deflect by a tremendous distance?
Yeah, James just wipes out the tree. Yeah. Screw limbs.
If you have a heavier arrow with more weight forward of center, it's going to deflect to a smaller degree if you tag a limb.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's the same thing with the 223. It deflects off a piece of grass.
Right. Yeah, you hit a mosquito on the way to the target, and it's like, I'm taking a right now.
So is that your main reason you use a heavier arrow?
I use a heavier arrow in case anything goes wrong. Yeah. So your light arrow, your arrow that's between 400 and 500 grains, with a 3-blade broadhead on it is going to do great if everything goes well. You're definitely going to kill that animal.
Perfect conditions.
Yep. But as soon as one thing goes wrong, then that lighter arrow is going to have a harder time overcoming the problem.
Yeah.
And then if 2 things go wrong, now it's probably not going to work out at all. But with a heavier arrow, if your shot is a little bit off, if that animal moves, if you tag a limb, name the number of things that can go wrong between the release and that arrow and that elk having a date together. A heavier arrow is better off. It also makes your bow quieter, and it makes your arrow flight quieter.
So talk about that. Let's one of your big components is keeping your speed under, is it 285?
280. Yeah. So what I found is anything north of 280 feet per second, you have a really loud arrow.
It kind of has a thwap to it, or it
yeah,
does.
And you can hear it in the air. And
yeah.
You know how when a truck's coming towards you on the highway, it sounds different as it's coming towards you, and then it sounds different as it's going away from you?
Yeah.
It's called the Doppler effect, right? And animals have all had things come towards them in nature, and they know what that sounds like. Well, when that arrow is going away from you, it has a sound of something going away from you, and that's the experience that we have with arrows. But I can tell you that if you have an arrow come towards you, you can hear it coming. And you're never going to have an arrow that beats the sound there. So they're always going to hear the bow. They're always going to hear the arrow before that arrow makes it to them, just because sound moves faster than the arrow. But I think that an animal's reaction when they're jumping the string is they're reacting to the sound of the arrow moving towards them, because it's scary now that there's something coming at them.
Yeah.
If you make a sudden noise in the woods,
crack a limb,
whatever, something similar to a bow going off, an animal doesn't drop 18 inches and then jump 8 feet to the left. That's not the reaction to that. That's a reaction to hearing that arrow coming towards them. So if you can make your arrow quieter by any means, then you're going to decrease that action. And the best way I know to do that is to make it go slower. So that's a happy advantage to going heavier. And part of the reason that everybody went so light was during a time when we didn't all carry laser rangefinders, and we needed to guess the distance, and trajectory was really important to getting the arrow to land where we wanted it to. Yeah. But now we know the exact yardage. We've got sliding sights and all kinds of advantages there. So what does it really matter what your pin gap is? You just range the animal. He's at 42 yards. Put it on it and go. And I still hear guys talking about pin gaps who are using a laser rangefinder for every shot that they take. Like, why do you care?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only downside would be that if an animal moves 2 yards, I mean, for your anchor, that's probably like what? You're 3 feet in front of the animal if it moves 2 yards.
No, that is a disadvantage. It is. If you're off on range, it matters a lot more than with a lighter arrow.
Yeah.
How much velocity does your arrow lose compared to a lighter arrow?
Well, that's an interesting question. I haven't actually shot my arrow at different ranges through somebody else's chronograph, which is what I would have to do, because I've definitely hit their chronograph at some point during that testing. But with bullets, heavier bullets maintain velocity better as they go down range. Not necessarily just heavier, but with a higher sectional density and ballistic coefficient. With an arrow, if you're putting a heavier head on it and you're putting brass inserts in it and doing whatever you have to do to make it heavier, you have the same external package. So you're basically increasing the ballistic coefficient of your arrow and decreasing the drag coefficient. So in physical theory, it's definitely going to maintain velocity better and shed velocity less. How much that actually matters to trajectory, I think, is negligible, but to the terminal performance of that arrow, once it hits an animal, it's definitely going to have a benefit because it's maintained its initial velocity better.
Yeah. You even basically make all your clients
We all shoot heavy arrows. We all shoot heavy arrows, and we all shoot single bevel, single blade broadheads. So no 3 blades on elk.
Why do you like single bevel?
Single bevel creates torque when it hits something, and torque is any type of force that causes twisting. So a single bevel, for those who aren't familiar with it, means that only one side of the broadhead blade is angled. So you have a flat edge and then an angled edge. And then on the other side of that, you have it angled on the opposite side of the broadhead. So when it hits something, it causes that bone or muscle tissue to part, and it leaves a gap for the arrow to go through. If you've ever come across a splitting maul, most of those are double bevel. It's a wedge going into the wood, but some of them are single bevel. So they have a flat edge and then a sloped edge. And when you hit a piece of wood with that, it flies apart like nothing you've ever seen. And it's because it creates torque as it's going in.
Which pops. And so if you look at the Dr. Ashby studies, they'll show you that they show these single bevel broadheads, when they go through a shoulder blade, because of that torque would actually break the shoulder blade, creating more space instead of just trying to wedge its way through there. Like imagine a splitting maul going in a piece of wood and just trying to wedge it apart. First, single bevel is trying to torque it. So it's trying to twist. And so it's going to break that bone and go through it.
Yeah. And then another advantage is you're causing a rotational force in flight as well. So your bevel has to match the helical of your vanes. And instead of a traditional broadhead where it's actually causing torque on the arrow shaft because the vanes are trying to move the broadhead through the air sideways as well as forwards, then the air pressure is creating torque on the arrow shaft, which is a little bit problematic when you're going through Archer's paradox and your arrow's flexing and doing all the crazy stuff that an arrow does. With that single bevel broadhead, you have the same rotational force on the front of the arrow as you do on the back, so you increase stability during flight, and your arrow will actually stabilize faster.
Joe Montana throwing a spiral down there.
Yeah. What else do I like about them? Oh, one of the things that I hear people say is oh, that's not as sharp. And the next time they go to a sushi restaurant, they should check out what kind of knife their chef is using, because a lot of sushi knives are single bevel, because they want to slice in a straight line to create these really thin strips of fish.
Yeah.
And those are extraordinarily sharp.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Good to know. And you run like 32 fletchings on the back.
I run 4 fletches at 3 degree helical, and I would put more on if I had more space on my arrow.
So 2 blade, 4 fletching. Do you line them up?
No, I don't care.
Don't care.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I don't think about which fletches are up when I put it on my bow. I shoot an ACC arrow, so the spine isn't as big of a deal as it is with a straight carbon arrow.
Yeah.
And then I'm shooting an 80-pound prime.
Yeah.
So with my short stubby arms, I've got a 28-inch draw length, 27.5 sometimes, and it's pushing that arrow 265 feet per second.
Who was it we were talking about? Shoots a 90-pound Safari. Was that Kyle?
Yeah, Kyle shoots a 95-pound Matthew Safari, and he's being a weirdo right now, and he went away from his 650 arrows that he shot last year, and he's shooting a 500 grain arrow, but he's shooting at 300 feet per second.
Huh.
And his sight housing is still clearing his arrow out to 125 yards. And he has over 100 pounds of kinetic energy.
That's insane.
It is insane.
95 pound. Yeah, but you were saying you shot that bow and it was like what did you say? When you're like when you're at full draw, your arm really wants to let go.
Well, your brain is looking forward to letting it go. So it's like it's one of those things where you're just being a coward, and it's like where the wind is wrong. You're like, maybe it'll work out. I'm just gonna force it. Like you draw that thing back, and you're pulling so much weight, and you're like, get this over with. So your pin gets even close to settling, and you're like, cook it off. Let's get it over.
Get a run at that trigger.
Yeah, that's right. Start from behind, swing in front, pull back, yank on it.
Just slap this shit out of that
trigger.
Elbow. Okay, we got another debate. Fixed blade versus replaceable blade knives. What's your thought?
What
Sam
do you
hasn't
think?
said anything this
Yeah.
whole podcast.
You had some thoughts about
A little
this.
shy here.
A little shy.
I don't know. I mean, I think they're great. Pat was saying that he likes his big old hunker chopper knife.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sam and I were saying, I think they're, I don't know, I've ran nothing but a Havalon since 2012. And I started just to see, because at first it was like, oh, I should probably have another knife. So I had a Havalon and a regular knife, because you're like, well, I might need one.
Yeah, I always carry two with me.
Yeah, but then you're like, well, what's the point of having a Havalon that's lighter?
Yeah.
I might as well just carry the regular damn knife.
Yeah, it's just nice having all those blades and just not having to worry about sharpening it or, you know.
Well, and they are extremely sharp.
Right.
I mean, you have a surgical blade. And
how sharp are they?
They're very sharp. they're almost cut your thumb off sharp.
Yeah.
Tell that story about when you almost cut your by yourself, cut your thumb off.
So yeah, I was skinning out a deer, and I was just gutting it out. I was using my Havalon, and I just knife slipped, got my thumb. I didn't really even notice it. I mean, it cut so well. I mean, it just sliced it right open. And then I kind of felt it a few seconds later and looked down, and I was looking at the bone of my thumb. And the moment I saw that, I almost passed out. I mean, you look in there, you're like, oh man, there's my bone. And it was a little overwhelming at first. And then you kind of like, I sat down for a minute. I'm like, all right, all I had was some electric tape and paper towels, and just taped it all up and went back to work. But they are dangerous. You don't want to cut yourself with them.
No.
And especially when you're by yourself in the woods. But
I've thought about that too. They're slightly dangerous.
Yeah.
I carry two knives. I carry an outdoor edge knife with replaceable blades. And I started carrying a full hilt boning knife with me. And what I was finding was with the outdoor edge knife, they're really sharp and they're backed up, and they don't break and fly into various places like some of those other replaceable blade knives might do.
It's like Havalon. It's like just grenades.
Oh, it's so scary.
And then you got to try to pull it out, and you're like, oh my god, I'm going to cut myself.
Yeah. No, I don't like that. But the outdoor edge blades are pretty soft, so they'll get dull if you have to cut through very much hair. So what I was finding is if I just brought my boning knife with me, which has a little bit harder blade and you can put a lot more pressure on it because it's got a full hilt, then one of the first things that I'm doing to an elk is knocking the legs off of it. And if you do that with your replaceable blade knife first thing, then by the time you get to actually gutting or knocking quarters off, you're working with a dull blade. So now you're going to have to change the blade partway through the animal when you're all jacked up and your hands are slippery, and it's just not a good time to be handling razor blades.
No.
That's true.
That's a good philosophy, because you don't need that razor blade knife when you're doing those things.
No.
I mean, usually now I have that buck knife I was talking about as a gut hook, and I gut it out with that and start with that. And then when you're doing your finishing touches, you use your Havalon or your outdoor edge.
Right.
Yeah, I do carry a pocket knife anymore. Like just a camp. You use a pocket knife for everything. I mean, you could use a Havalon for everything. I think you can get away with only a Havalon.
Yeah, but you got to dig that thing out of the bottom of your pack, and you're trying to find it, and you just pull it out of your pocket and get a little knife on you.
Yeah.
This little Kershaw here has done some wonders for sure.
Yeah. I got a Benchmade that's just like that one, and it's done a lot of killing stuff.
Yeah.
I think we've all had that knife we've kept forever. I mean, I've had my knife for probably 15 years, and I would never think about getting rid of it. But
so if you were building your pack right now, I mean, obviously, average hunter, backpacking and stuff, how many blades, how many knives? Do you take a saw? Do you not take a saw?
I take a wire saw, like the little run it back and forth things.
Why?
Because they're really light and they're really small, and you can cut through a skull cap with them, and that's it. So if
you can use one of those wires things on a skull cap.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Never tried that.
Yeah. Don't you don't want to overdo it and like try and get the whole thing done in 7 zips. Like take your time. Don't put too much pressure on it. Otherwise it'll break. But you can totally, then you're hosed. But you can totally do that. And skulls are heavy, man. Elk skulls weigh a lot.
Yeah.
You don't need to be packing that whole thing out.
No.
That's crazy.
Especially if you're going to cape it out.
Yeah.
Cape weighs enough. Don't pack the whole head.
Yeah.
I used to carry a Wyoming in my pack.
So did I.
And then I realized how heavy the damn thing was. Even though it's a lighter unit, but I threw that thing back. It's at camp now. I don't like to carry any weight.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was just like I grew up because Dad had a saw with him all the time, and so I packed a saw. And then one day I'm like, I haven't used this in like 3 years.
Yeah. I do know guys that will just carry the bone blade from the Wyoming saw, and you can make that work too. And it's a big weight savings. It's going to take some time. I have a full package of blades for my outdoor edge knife. They don't weigh that much. So I think they come in 10 packs or 12 packs. I shove them all in there.
Yeah, same here. I just shove them in that little pouch deal.
Yeah.
That's with it.
I put as many as I can in there because they're going to break.
Yeah.
You'll need them.
And like last year, I think we killed 22 elk.
22?
Yeah. I went through a freaking pile of outdoor edge blades, but it's still a good way to go.
God. It's a lot of blades. Outdoor edge over Havalon?
Yeah. Just because I had the Havalons break. And I know they've got some thicker blades and stuff out there now. But at this point, I've got a couple outdoor.
I think the blades went downhill.
Really? When they got thicker?
No, I think they're thinner now. I think the old blades on the Havalon used to not break as much.
I will agree with that. When I first got my Havalon, I didn't have problems with breaking blades. And recently, probably within the last couple of years, I've noticed it a lot. And they break easy.
You can get surgical ones. Someone told me the website. There's some website you can get like a little higher grade surgical blades, and it'll fit on the Havalon because the Havalon's just a standard doodad for surgical blades. So you can get fancier ones. You can get different angles and shit too.
Well, I really encourage people to look at what kind of knives professional knife users are using. Like go into the meat shop in your grocery store and be like, hey man, what are you cutting with every day?
Yeah, but you're
not
gonna pack that into the backcountry.
Why not? They're super light. They've got a plastic handle. They usually cost $18. Yeah. What I'm saying is it's a great option. Yeah. And it's a real knife that you can do some real work with.
No, and that's true. I mean, I was thinking about that because I got these one of my listeners sent me those boning knives and a bottle of scotch. The greatest thing I've ever done.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, I know. And the knives are amazing. I might give you one.
Podcast.
I should start a podcast.
What happened with the scotch?
Yeah. But the boning knives are super lightweight. And just plastic handle. Be easy to throw that in there.
Yeah, they're great. And I just take a piece of cardboard and fold it over and tape it. Yeah, and then I put enough electrical tape around it that's what I'm using to wrap a tag on. And when that knife is coming out, it's because the tag needs punched. Yeah. So it's just part of my kill kit and keeps it really light.
What bags do you put in your kill? You use bags?
I do use bags when I'm hunting backcountry, and they're Black Ovis bags.
I got some Jared Soul, the Black Ovis bags
with reflective stuff on it. I can't.
That's really nice.
Overemphasize the importance of the reflective stuff.
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
Because you can find it in the dark a lot easier.
Yeah, because when you're going back in for the second load and you're tired and you're dehydrated and you don't even like hunting anymore, there's nothing worse than bumbling around in the deadfall that this stupid elk decided to die in, looking for these game bags, and now you're like, oh, this is the part where I was blood trailing. Like, now I get to do it again. It's just brutal. And then you pull out your phone and it says nothing because it died. And you're just hosed at that point and you're dumbing around. But when it has the reflective stuff, you look at it from across a canyon with a headlamp and it's glowing, like inviting you to come over there and get heavy again.
Do you ever take flagging tape? Now, they're one of those things that was passed down to me and I packed around for years and never used. So I stopped carrying, I used to carry logger tape just because Dad carried logger tape, so I did. And I never use it, so now I stopped carrying it.
Do you carry
anything?
No.
Yeah. Flagging bug trails?
I have carried those retro reflective thumbtacks because they're super light and they don't take up space, and you can stick those to trees. But when I've done that, it's when I'm going in to hunt a new area and I'm going to be hunting it for a week or something.
Yeah.
Then once I determine my route into it, then I'll thumbtack my route in so that I'm doing it the same way in the dark, and it just helps me out. Because you talked about it earlier, if you're doing an expedition hunt, your brain is not going to work as well at the end of that as it did at the beginning. Like, you're wearing yourself down and not realizing it. So if you use the front end of that hunt to make the back end more efficient, then you can kind of compensate for the net loss that you're experiencing in your own capabilities.
It's so true. It is so true.
When we were talking about the knives, going back to that, and gut and stuff, you guys don't do the gutless method?
I do. I haven't gutted an animal in a long time.
Me neither. That's what I was kind of saying. Just use the blanket, side to side, pull the legs off.
Especially by myself, it's almost easier than.
Oh yeah.
I get a lot of elk out whole. And that's just because a lot of times I'm hunting in more open ground. I also have a team of draft horses that I can pull an elk with if I have to. But I do like, I'm a meat guy, and that kind of comes from the beef side of things too. So every time you make a cut into meat, you're guaranteeing that there's going to be less meat retained later on, because it's just more surface area that's exposed and stuff like that. So if I can get an animal out whole, even guts in, I'm definitely going to do that.
Yeah.
And it requires some equipment and stuff like that to be able to pull that off. But if nobody's had the experience of gutting an animal that's hanging, it's awesome. It's so much nicer and so much cleaner.
Yeah. I mean, look, I've done a lot of beef, just full beef hanging, or deer even. Gut it while it's hanging.
Right. There's no blood and gnarliness that gets inside that cavity. It's just,
and that's the thing.
nicer.
People, even with boning out versus say quartering out, a lot of times I'll leave the bone in the quarter, just because when you bone out meat, like you were saying, you pull that, even if you're good, you can unwrap it and just basically fillet all your meat off. You still have all that surface area that just created silver skin. Yeah. And so now you have to trim all that off. The waste is a lot higher versus you can get that whole quarter in the cooler.
Well, and then you can do your meat cuts a lot better too when they're hung up there and you bring it back home.
I've seen pictures of guys packing out meat bags, and every individual muscle group within that back ham is in an individual thing. It's like, now you got to shave all of that.
Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah,
that's a lot of lost meat.
But then when you're you got little calves like me and you're 10 miles that way, and you gotta.
Bones aren't that heavy though.
No, they're not.
It doesn't save you very much.
No.
I don't know. You think bones are heavy?
7 pounds.
7 pounds is what all. Yeah, I think that's about right.
Yeah. So
300 pounds of meat. You're worried about 7 pounds.
7 pounds per quarter.
Is it 7 pounds per quarter?
Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
It just fits nice when you get meat and you just throw it all in your pack. You don't have the bone sticking out and doing this and doing that. And
well, the bone structure can be nice too.
Yeah, if you want the way you want to center your weight or whatever.
For giving it some support. Yeah. And it just goes back to make the fewest number of cuts that you can to get that animal to a place where you can process it, and use the most cuts that you have to do a good job of getting the meat off of it.
I would say if an animal's a mile from the pickup, I'll probably leave quarters in.
Oh, yeah,
not that big of a deal. You save a lot of meat by leaving it bone on.
So one thing about this that has absolutely been killing me lately is seeing guys packing quarters without knocking the legs off.
Yeah, when the foot's just hanging out over the pack.
What is going on with that?
I just shake my head and laugh.
It's so easy to knock them off. And you hadn't seen that trick before your cow last year, right?
What was it that you did?
Well, you just make a little cut. So the way to do it is you bend the leg, whether it's the front leg or the back leg, until it's at a 90-degree angle. And then you follow the inside of the top of the leg down and then cut all the way around. And then you're going to be pretty close to the break joint. And it's a joint like a knuckle.
Oh, it was the front legs. That's what it was.
Yeah, and the hind legs.
Well, the hind legs are easy. Those are... Yeah. It has that joint right there, pop the joint.
Right.
But the front legs actually have that joint too.
They do too. So it's really easy to just run your knife around there, find that point, and you'll hear it when you hit it. And it's usually lower than what people think, because they think that they're cutting through the middle of the joint where they can see it bend, but it's below that. and you'll hear it pop open, and then you can just knock that thing off there, and it's really clean. And now you're saving yourself some real weight. There's no meat there. You don't need to pack out hooves, for the love of Pete.
What if I want to make a sweet gun rack?
I was going to say.
Jesus scolded me with the No, the only thing you really need a bone saw for is a skull cap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
And if you have a hatchet, that works good too.
Hatchets are awesome. Hatchets are an underrated tool because if you have a good hatchet, you can do the whole thing with it. If you've never skinned with a hatchet, that's something to try out. It's actually not bad. So
really?
Yeah. Well, it's just like an ulu, right? It's got that big sweeping edge, and a good one gets really sharp.
Yeah.
Like you're not sacrificing anything, and then they stay really sharp too. So I had this awesome axe from Best Made that I just broke this year, and I'd completely skinned, gutted, and quartered several animals just with that.
Really?
Yeah, and that's a case where I'm rolling in there with a side by side and getting to the animal, and then it's just really fast to get quarters knocked off and get them skinned and gutted like that, just with one tool.
That's a good idea. I like to have one in the backcountry, just firewood, whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tool. Yeah, camp tool.
Yeah, it's
one of my favorites. Good hatchet.
And the honestly, the bigger the better. Like a lot of people have whacked themselves with hatchets when it was a place that they drove to. Like, go ahead and use an axe, man. Like, your truck
won't.
How's
the handle on Best Made?
Well, both pieces of the handle are now about, I don't know, 12 inches.
So it's got a longer handle on it then.
Like it was a felling axe, Hudson Bay head. So, but just really good seal. And I just need to stop being lazy and send it back to them, and they'll put a new handle on it.
Any other tools you can think of that most people don't use? What's your favorite piece of gear?
Trekking poles.
That's a new one on me too.
God, I love them.
Same here.
I borrowed my buddy Josh's in Idaho, and it was great.
I think everyone at this table at one time had made fun of trekking poles.
Definitely.
I've made fun of a lot of trekking.
I was making fun of you when we went to Montana, and then I ended up using them on the way out.
This is true. Like Stuart still makes fun of everyone, but Pat was making fun of me so hard for having trekking poles when we went in that first time, and then the next time he had them because he used mine coming out. Yeah, undeniable piece of gear right there.
But I've got to say that the most important piece of gear on an archery hunt is a broadhead. And the way that I'm going to back this up is by explaining how everything is used. So you've got a truck that takes you to the trailhead, and your truck is important for that. Then you've got your boots to carry you, and your pack to carry all your gear, and your camouflage to keep you concealed. And then you head in, and then you use your calls to get this out close. And then you use your bow to fire this arrow. And the arrow, its only job is carrying the broadhead and going in a specific place. And then everything that you've done up until that point is just to get this broadhead inside of an elk.
It's true.
Like you just spent $50,000 up until this point, and then you bought your broadheads from Walmart because they were on sale. Like it had an orange sticker on it. Like this is where we're going to save money. No, sir. You buy good broadheads because everything you've done is just trying to get that thing inside an elk's lungs.
That's it.
That's it.
That's a good point. And everything from there out is just getting that back.
Yes. It is 100% about the broadhead. And people they're like, yeah, G5 Montec. Used it last year on a turkey. Did pretty well. I'm going to use it again.
Yeah. I'm going to put $50,000 into getting this $12 item into it.
You gotta be kidding me. And, guys will come into the shop that I shoot for and be like, well, what do you shoot? And I shoot this one. That's pretty expensive. Like, well, it's the same quality of steel as knives. Do you like knives? Well, how much do you spend on your knife? $120? That's great. That was for one blade. You're getting a 3-pack here. And it's really important. Like, don't chump it. Like, pay attention. It's critical.
What do you think of the Valkyries?
seen a lot of them break lately. They're an awesome arrow. As far as I can tell, they're an awesome arrow. But when you go with a really high FOC and you use the whole system, they're unforgiving.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of what I put into my bow and arrow system and my sights, everything, is not operating at 100% capacity. So something that we did in the Marine Corps in all of our shooting is fault induction. So with a full up system, and I'm talking about shooting tanks here for those of you who don't know, but with a full up system, everything's automated and it's really easy. It's like shooting on a video game. Like put the thingy on the thingy and pull the trigger and it's going to hit. But let's just say that in this computer world that something goes wrong. Like I have to restart my iPhone every 2 weeks. Well, now you have to have a redundant backup system. So you start inducing faults, like saying that your wind meter isn't working or your thermometer isn't working. With archery, it's the same way. So I want an arrow where if I slap my trigger or I change my grip or something like that, that the arrow is going to respond better. And that's why I use 4 fletches with 3-degree helicals. When my bow's tuned perfectly, I don't need fletches at all. That's why bare shaft tuning is what it is. Like your arrow still hits center. But when you start adding wind and things that go wrong, then you need more and more redundancy in your system to back it up.
It's true. It's trying to limit the things that can go wrong.
Right, and have a plan for when they do.
Contingency.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The problem, man, that's a lot of money, though, on those Valkyries. So if you're saying that the broadhead is the most important tool, I don't know.
Well, Valkyrie's broadhead's a 3-blade, and I'm anti-3-blade. 4-blade is better than 3-blade, and the Ashby studies indicated this as well. But if you think about it, a 3-blade broadhead has to cut in 3 different directions. A 4-blade broadhead only has to cut in 2 different directions. And the cut doesn't care that there's a ferrule at the center of it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're cutting through a bone or something hard, whether it's hide or a big piece of muscle or whatever, you're doing more damage with less resistance with a 4-blade than you are with a 3-blade. And that's hard for people to wrap their mind around. But if they go out and test it, which I encourage them to do, they'll find it true.
Yeah.
And then, the single blade has least resistance. Why
are so many broadheads 3-blades?
I think it's just what people are used to. It was the bill of sale that we were sold. And then we also got told that we had to match our blades up with our vanes.
So where did the 3 come from?
The 3? I don't know. That's interesting. But matching blades with vanes is some craziness.
Because when we carved broadheads out of rocks,
mm-hmm.
we didn't make 3-blade rocks.
No.
So when did that come about?
And we're getting total pass-throughs on buffalo with 40-pound bows that were 2 feet.
What's your thought on dudes?
Axle.
I see a lot of dudes trying to carve out broadheads, make their own stuff. What's your thought on that?
I don't think it's ethical.
I don't think so either. I mean, it's interesting. Like, I
primitive.
get, it's primitive.
Kind of going back to what the ancestors did.
Yeah, but if you would have handed our ancestors a freaking 2-blade and broadhead, brand new,
it's probably pride, isn't it?
They would use it.
Yeah, they'd be like, so
they're not going to turn it down.
I think it's a toxic form of nostalgia that doesn't examine history correctly. Because as soon as the American Indians got their hands on steel, that's what they used for their broadheads.
Mm.
Yeah,
and they gave up on rock and bone altogether. So to say, well, it's about history, yes and no. It's about a portion of history before technology allowed advancement, and that's the portion that you're going to look at. And obsidian heads are beautiful. There's no doubt about it. And they are very sharp. On a microscopic level, the edge of obsidian is thinner than the edge of a razor blade. But their resilience isn't very good because they shatter. So if you're going to take an animal's life into your hands and make an ethical choice about how it dies, I think you need to use the best technology available.
Yeah, but to play devil's advocate, who are we to judge ethics or,
We're our own judge.
Yeah.
And for me, I want to kill in the most lethal way that I can as quickly as I can. And within the constructs of what's legal.
So why don't you use a gun over a bow?
Because I don't have the opportunity to use a gun every year. If I could hunt with a rifle every year, I would. And I would shoot a bow for fun and not at animals. But I feel compelled to hunt every year, and it's my profession. So in Oregon, I can do that every year with a bow.
It's an interesting dynamic because when you say, well, it's not as ethical, but a bow's not as ethical in theory as a gun, but yet we argue it a lot.
We do argue it a lot. And yeah, that's just the nature of the beast.
And I think that depends, though, too, on who's shooting the bow.
Oh, absolutely.
Because there are definitely ethical shots you take with a bow and non-ethical shots you take.
I would say I'm far more ethical with a bow than a lot of people are out hunting with a gun.
I agree, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of brings into question, like, the Total Archery Challenge that we just shot this weekend.
Yeah, we were talking about that up there. Like
most of these shots were between 70 and 130 yards.
Yeah.
And my maximum range with my arrow setup is 73 yards. That's as far as my scope can move.
That's not how far you're shooting. That's just how far you can put a pin on.
That's something. How far I can put a pin on the target. And when you looked at these targets, and I encourage folks to get out on social media and look at some of these pictures of what these targets looked like. They were spackled with arrows, and people are just trying to get in the foam. And we broke a ton of arrows. I mean, our group probably broke $1,000 worth of arrows up there. And the number of sure enough kill shots, like that were precisely planted where they were aimed, was very low. And
Corey Jacobson, who's freaking that guy's a robot.
I think he's a robot. Yeah, I don't think he's a human.
Yeah,
he's nice.
He's a nice robot. It's good programming.
Yeah, his software is really good. He smiles, looks at you, listens.
He looks a lot like a human.
Yeah.
Talks like a human.
Yeah.
Seriously, Corey draws back, puts pin on target, pulls trigger, 12 ring.
At 127 yards.
Yeah. He's like, you want me to shoot that deer?
And he's got this Terminator pose when he does it, too. And he comes back, and he sits there for a second, which he doesn't have to because his bow isn't moving at all. And
it's just the program to make it seem human. Right. He has to, aim for a minute.
Yeah. And then he fires, and his draw hand and his bow hand don't move. And it's like they deny the bow movement as well. And there's this brief moment in time where you wonder if maybe there's a glitch in the Matrix and you might miss, and then thump, 10 ring. And it's like, oh, the robot did it again.
But on a grander scale, we were talking about on the way back from the shoot, here we are promoting 100-yard slinging arrows at animal-shaped targets at 100 yards. And where does that go, down the line? How does that trickle down? And how does that changes people's confidence or mental status when they're 72 yards from a bull that is a once-in-a-lifetime bull? I made that shot at Total Archery Challenge. Yeah. I can do it.
This might go back to what we were talking about before with animals hearing arrows. So when you shoot at 100 yards, they're going to have plenty of time to jump your arrow and hear that arrow.
Here. Bye.
Yeah. That's where it doesn't matter how good of a shot you are. That animal's not going to be where you shot at it when the arrow gets there.
And if you've I do think that at some of the really long ranges that they hear it less, and the arrow's slowing down by the time they're getting there. So there's less string jump. And we've all seen these videos of these ridiculously long range mule deer shots and coulees where the wind's blowing and the deer never twitches at all before the arrow gets there. But that arrow has a 2-second time of flight maybe over the course of that shot, and you have no idea what's going to happen in the natural world in those 2 seconds that animal might move. And if it does move at all, then you no longer have control of that shot. And I think that the time of flight is the real ethical dilemma in a long-range arrow shot. Now, I'm not bagging on Total Archery Challenge, and I think that it's a really fun event, and it's really cool to go out there with a group of guys and walk around in your sandals on the mountain.
We forgot to bring that up.
But I want people to realize that there's a difference between shooting foam and shooting critters.
Yeah.
And
it's not a video game.
It's not a video game, and don't try and compare the two in your mind. You're shooting targets or you're hunting. Mm-hmm. And just because they're shaped like the animals that you're hunting doesn't mean that they are the animals that you're hunting, because they don't move. The foam doesn't move.
Yeah. Do you think most people understand that?
I couldn't speak to that. I don't have that data. I did this year take in 1,200 samples of people who told me what their last 3 elk shots were with a bow. And that was kind of interesting. That was a big data set. And it was the average of those data points was 23 yards. That's the average elk shot.
Really? 1,200? So I remember this. I commented on it, but you had posted something about what was your last 3 distances.
Right.
And then 1,200 people replied to that. So you had
I had 400 replies that seemed credible. A lot of people didn't read the instructions very well. So then I took those 3 points from those 400 people and I put it in a spreadsheet, and then I averaged it out, and it was 23 yards, which, goes back to my, heavy arrow mantra. Like, how light of an arrow do you need? Like, this is the average elk shot amongst how many, 1,200 points. How many lifetimes of archery shots is that?
Yeah.
That's a pretty good data set. 23 yards. Get your 1,600 grain arrow out there and let her rip.
I will also say that that goes into people are really good at shooting 40, 50, 60 yards, but not good at shooting 10.
No, or 3.
Yeah, 3. It's a tough one.
Yeah. One of the shoots that I'm going to be at next weekend, or the shoot I'm going to be at next weekend, they have a 3-yard target, and it is just broken arrow central. It's amazing. And you watch people go up to it and they look at it and they look at their bow and like they want to change something, and they come to full draw and they're like looking around, and then slam, granite.
I know a lot of people missed at like 7 yards, 6 yards.
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're supposed to use like 50-yard pen.
So the biggest bull I ever killed was a couple years ago, and it was at 8 yards. And people ask me all the time, what pin did you use? First of all, I felt like I was having a heart attack. Like, I had all the signs of stroke going on. And what pin did I use? I can tell you that my entire sight housing would have killed him. So, like, let's get real.
Yeah.
Like, pull back. Do everything right. Look through your peep. Lift your rest.
Get a good run at your trigger.
Things like that. Yeah. Slap that trigger. Just shoot it.
Yeah.
It's gonna work out. But also, I called him in myself, quartering 2, and I shot that bull through the joint at the bottom of his scapula, and it came out his ribs on the far side.
Wow.
And a lot of people would take that shot and they would get 1 3/4 inches of penetration and then walk a bull limp off.
Yeah. What's your thought on frontal shots?
Send it.
Just gonna send it.
But you got to know. And I think it's important to get a hold of some rib cages and look at images on the internet if you can't get your hands on rib cage, and learn where that is. And even guys who have taken the frontal shot and know it and have been around elk a lot will say things like, "Oh, I'm just aiming at the color change or whatever." Like, that depends on how that bull's holding his head. Like, you have to be looking inside that bull like you have X-ray vision, and then aiming at that thoracic opening. And if you hit it, it's lights out. Like, that's a dead elk, very dead elk. And he's probably going to die right in front of you.
What's the distance on your frontal shots? What would you tell a client? 50 yards frontal shot? No?
What I tell a client is the same thing that I tell myself. I will only take shots on an animal where I feel like I'm going to hit precisely where I intend to. I don't allow for a margin of error. And for me, that's 40 yards. On targets, it's a different story. I can stretch it out a lot farther and I can hit in a kill zone, but I can't be assured that I'm going to hit precisely where I intend to. And that's the limitation of my skill. And with clients, I tell them the exact same thing. Like, take a shot that is a 99% shot.
What's your thought on a lot of people tell clients, or a lot of people have been told, like, you draw blood, you're done. Do you think that changes the psychology of your shot impact, shot taking, a lot of that?
Yes. I play by Africa rules personally. So if I draw blood, I'll punch a tag on it, and it's painful, but it's less painful than dying slowly in the brush somewhere. And I have a really hard time with guys who take a shot and then they'll track it for a day or 2 days and be like, yeah, we're going to find him. We're going to find him. We're going to find him. And then they don't find it. And they go, well, he's fine. And they just became a field veterinarian that knows that elk isn't going to get a bacterial infection and die of gangrene or something else.
Yeah.
Like, would you survive an archery wound of any kind if you're in the woods without medical care? I don't know. I think that I'd be at serious health risk, and I would feel like I was at serious health risk, and I wouldn't want somebody that got a 10-second look at me from 79 yards away to make an assessment of whether I'm going to live or die, and then just leave me to it. And that's literally what we're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it changes the mentality.
I do think when you go into it, excuse me, when you go into that with that mentality that, you know, if I draw blood, I'm done, it changes what you shoot at or the shots you take.
It's like shooting a single shot as a kid.
Yeah.
Like the kids that grow up with 10-22s, they aren't good shots. And they're good at sending bullets, but the kids that grew up with single shots, they're murderers.
It is so true. That is so true. You get the old gun where you're like one bullet at a time.
Yeah.
This one better count. Yeah, when I got a 10-22, it was like rapid fire. Yeah, I don't know. That's I think a lot of people do shoot just to shoot. Maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. You know, put a lot of faith behind an arrow.
Yeah.
But things go wrong. I don't know. I guess it's situation dependent if I punch my tag or not. I've lost 2 bulls in my life. One was literally, the season was close. It was last night of the season. And another one, I was pretty sure he was fine, but I was probably playing veterinary. You know, the veterinarian that got one look at him.
Right.
But he did circle back up with his cows. He could have still died. I don't know.
Well, and bulls survive amazing things. You know, I found bullets.
They are tough
on the inside of the far shoulder of elk before. I sliced my arm open on a broadhead inside of a back strap one time when I was pulling the strap out of an elk. I mean, they really do survive stuff, but they also don't. Like for every one of those where you find a wounded animal that lived, how many deadheads did you find out in the field or carcasses in the bottom of a ravine? And you're like, oh, that was a mountain lion, or you don't know.
Well, like my bull that I got in the chest nimbus, that thing had 3 legs.
Yeah,
3 legs, and it was full, and it was from the season prior. I mean, it was fully hair all over that knee there.
Literally shot off at the knee.
Yeah, and it was kind of sad because the angle that he was shot at, it blew his pecker off.
Yeah.
So it was like, it was his pecker down his leg. And that thing was, we didn't even know he was missing a leg. He was eating, looking up, and we dropped him and then went over, and I was like scratching my head like, something's wrong here.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, this animal is robust. Like, that's crazy. And then all the predators that he probably had to fight off or ran from, or I don't know.
Yeah, that's my only point, is that you don't know one way or another. I shot I'm gonna one up you. I'm sorry.
Oh no,
I hate doing this. I prefer to one down people. Like I shot an elk with 4 legs. No, but I killed a 2-legged coyote this winter.
Oh, that's right.
What?
Yeah.
Did he have wheels behind him?
No, he had a back left and a front right. His front left was off pretty high, and his back right was recently off, and his back end was tore up, like he'd gotten in a fight with some other coyotes or dogs or whatever. And I think he had lost that one in the last couple days. But he was trooping across my hillside, and my lab was going nuts. And I just went upstairs and grabbed a rifle and shot him. And he was moving slow, but I did not know until I got over there that he was a 2-legged coyote. And looking back on that, I don't know whether I would have killed him or not if I had it to do over again.
Yeah.
I think either way is okay.
I heard a story one time of this, it was in a magazine, one of the Bugle or something. The guy had an Arizona tag, pretty good tag, and comes across this bull, and it's 3-legged, and it's like hopping around. And he's like, man, this is a really good tag, but I feel like I should shoot this bull because it's, it's the right thing to do. And ended up passing the bull. Dang it, whatever. I'm going to wait. It's a good tag. I don't want to just shoot whatever. It was like the next day, 20 miles away as a crow flies, he finds this same bull chasing cows. And he's like, okay, I don't feel so bad about this bull. I mean, like, they're just resilient. Well, and Mark, you probably see that a lot. I mean, bulls.
Oh, yeah, everywhere. I mean, we're covering a lot of country, seeing a lot of animals, and all the time you see animals with broken legs out there. God knows what did it. And we found broadheads stuck in the nose of an elk, and they're still, they broke that arrow shaft off, and they're still eating, and I mean, they're just healthy as can be.
It's crazy.
The bull that I killed last year, he'd either been gored or he'd been shot, and I think I told you about this, but
oh yeah, the puss bucket. Yeah,
and he bugled when he came in, but his bugle was like that's pretty weak given that you're like a 300-inch bull. And he tried again, and it just didn't look right, and he's kind of shuffling on his way in. And when he got to 30 yards, he turned broadside, and his eye that was towards me was closed. I was like, perfect. This is a dreamy elk.
He's tired.
And
so tired.
Yeah, I shot him and he died. And when I got over to him, he had a piece of bark in his tear duct on that eye, because he'd obviously been raking, and he just got a piece of wood in there, so his eye was a little bit bothered by that. So that was his bad luck. But when I went to gut him, a bunch of black blood came out of him, and I'd shot him up forward in the shoulder, and there shouldn't have been any blood behind the diaphragm, and I was really weirded out by it. And then I started gutting him, and he had this big yellow spot on his side, and he had a scab that was tufted over. There's no way for me to know whether it was a bow or another bull or something else ran into a limb. There's no way to war game that and figure it out. And the meat ended up being fine, but he did have blood all inside of his intestines and stuff like that, and he had an infection.
There's no way he could have lived from that.
I think that kills him. He had infected blood inside of his guts, but that bull was still coming in to bugles to be the man.
Yeah.
So
they don't know any different. And I think that's what would have killed him. I think it's tough to say, but the same injury in late season, not late season, let's say early season when he's resting and not doing anything. It'd be the same thing if you got injured and you're just going 100 miles an hour.
Right.
That's going to change how you heal versus, if you're resting and just, trying to recoup. So that bull, yeah, like you said, who knows how it went down, but mid-rut, and he's got one thing on his brain, he's going to die or bone.
Yeah.
Die or breed. That's it. Yeah. Interesting.
Well, flying in Alaska, we do a big project up there every year. It's a caribou calf mortality study. So there's like 75 collared cows that we look at every day, and we go, once that cow gives birth, we'll catch it, put a radio collar on it, and monitor the mortality, what's killing them, wolves, bears, whatever. And so these cows getting looked at every day, and there's one cow that had a calf the night before, and we went in camp, it's too late to work or whatever. We came back the next day, her calf was gone, and she was completely tore up. Her whole right side was just opened up. I mean, flesh wound, not like guts or anything hanging out, but the hide completely tore off and just covered in blood. And so we're thinking wow, there's no way it's going to live. Absolutely no way. So, I mean, I don't know what happened to her. She probably got a bear, came in to get her calf or something and got swiped by a bear or whatever. But so we just watched her for 2 weeks, and she lived for 2 weeks. And then this last year we just went up there, and she's still alive, and you cannot tell one bit that she had anything like that happen to her.
Right.
And, really?
Yeah. I mean, that's just incredible. I mean, a wound that big.
Sure.
It didn't get infected, and she didn't get eaten by a predator or whatever. It's incredible.
That's nuts.
Yeah, I have to breathe deeply if I stub my toe.
Hit your shin. And,
Oh, yeah. Trailer hitch. It's like, time out. I'm going to take 10.
Take 10. Need a break. Oh. Here's an elk with his side ripped off. That's insane. Alrighty, guys. Well, appreciate it. Doing some elk hunting. Get me all excited about elk this year.
Congratulations on being married.
Yeah. Thank you guys for coming all the way to Montana.
thanks for having us.
Thanks for James for putting in the vows that I could hunt forever whenever I wanted.
Happy to do it.
That's what friends are for.
Yep.
Alrighty, guys. Well, safe travels back. And again, thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers.
This episode brought to you by Backcountry Fuel Box. Backcountry Fuel Box is my newest creation. It's a monthly subscription box full of backcountry meals, snacks, bars, and all kinds of cool high-energy options for your next backcountry adventure. I started the box because I wanted a way to try out all the cool new backcountry food options that were on the market. And also, so I would always have stuff on hand for my own adventures. There's just so many cool new options available. The June box had all kinds of great products and new companies that I think most people have probably never heard of. Brands like 4 Points Bars, Peak Refuel, Dark Mountain Energy, just to name a few. All in all, the June box was packed full with 10 awesome products and discount codes to all the companies within the box. Enough to taste test a few of the items and to hide the rest in my tote for September. The box is $33.30 a month, but if you use the TRO at checkout, use the TRO code, you'll get the box for $29.97 a month, and it is full of awesome stuff that you're actually going to use. Also, I just want to say a big shout out to all of you who have been sharing the box when you get it on social media. I am thoroughly humbled by the dozens and dozens of people that have been helping grow this thing, and it really does mean the world to me. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. There's a whole bunch of awesome stuff coming from this whole Backcountry Fuel project, and you guys have been awesome and instrumental in helping me get there and kind of grow this whole thing. So if you guys haven't yet, go check it out. Give it a try. There's literally zero commitment. I'm not trying to scam anyone. I just want everyone to stay signed up because the box is so awesome. Head over to backcountryfuelbox.com. Check it out. You won't be disappointed. All right. Thanks, guys. This episode of Wapiti Wednesday brought to you by Phelps Game Calls. Phelps Game Calls are hands down my favorite diaphragms, and I've tried out just about every diaphragm on the market, and the amp frame is what I carry. The amp frame, not only is extremely easy to use, but they're the most consistent calls you can find and extremely durable. As someone who can blow out a diaphragm in just a few days, the first time I used one of the new amp frame calls, I was blown away at how long it lasted. I can get a few weeks out of a single Phelps diaphragm versus a couple days out of just about any other diaphragm on the market. Personally, I like the amp gray and the amp white, but if you don't have any idea what to use or what to try, just grab 4 or 5 of them and see what you like. You know, some of you guys are going to like locating on one, and some of you guys are going to like the sexy cow calls on another. But either way, I think you'll be able to use any of them. They all sound great, and they all work super well. It's just kind of all on personal preference. A couple of you guys have asked me about the big bat bugles and if they're necessary. For me, 100%, I am naked in the woods without my bat bugle. The Phelps bat just gives me so much more reach when I'm bugling, as far as being able to be louder and carry a bugle farther into a canyon. If you only want to be the kind of guy that slips into a herd of elk and doesn't do a whole lot of screaming challenge bugles, even just having the bat as a locating tool is crucial. You can carry that bugle so much farther, locate a bull from farther away, and to me, it's an essential item in my toolkit. Go get yourself some Phelps game calls before they sell out. Before season comes, get to practicing, get good at it, use the TRO code, and you'll get free shipping off your entire order. Hey, thanks for tuning in to Wapiti Wednesday. If you guys have questions that either we didn't cover in this episode or you just like to see in future episodes, be sure to drop us a line at info@therichoutdoors.net or be sure to join the Rich Outdoors Insiders group on Facebook for more information, as well as some really cool gear giveaways. Thanks for listening, guys.